Stephen Kinnock.
The Speaker, and it's a pleasure to follow the honourable gentleman, even though I'm afraid that large parts of his speech were based on magical thinking. But, Mr. Speaker, I rise today to address Schedules 4 and 5 of this bill, which propose the introduction of a new post-Brexit trade defence regime. Trade remedies enable countries to defend themselves against underpriced and state-subsidised goods, and so they play a vital, pivotal role in the rules-based WTO system. Governments would never have agreed to the radical liberalisation of trade liberalisation of the past half-century were they not reassured that they could act to step in and defend their industries if necessary. Trade defence remedies have therefore played a central role in tearing down the walls that prevent free and fair trade. How ironic, therefore, that this bill is the work of a Conservative government. For the party that claims to be the voice of enterprise, free trade, business and industrial strategy has produced a bill that, if passed in its current form, would fatally undermine the British manufacturing sector. To illustrate my point, I'd like to focus on what this bill in its current form would mean for the British steel industry, which is centred on the Port Talbot steelworks in my Aberavon constituency. Over a third of the EU's 92 trade defence instruments relate to steel. And over the years, these 30-odd measures have played a vital part in stemming the flow of dumped Chinese steel that almost led to the total collapse of the British steel industry. Mr. Speaker, the Chinese Communist Party owns 80% of its steel industry. They subsidise it to the hilt, and they sell the steel at well below cost on the global market. It's a well-established strategy which the Chinese state pursues relentlessly and ruthlessly in its bid to extinguish all competition and to establish monopoly status. As the cross-party Steel APPG's Steel 2020 report, supported and signed by members now serving in the government, concluded, trade defence instruments exist not to unfairly protect certain sectors of the economy, but rather to support the free, fair and efficient functioning of the market. Now, I'm certainly not going to stand here and claim that the EU's trade remedies regime works perfectly. It does not. It's often been too slow and too bureaucratic, and has unfortunately been hamstrung by the lesser duty rule. But the fact of the matter is that the European Commission acts on behalf of 28 member states and 500 million consumers. So when it threatens action, even behemoths like China sit up and take notice. It's therefore no exaggeration to say that were it not for the anti-dumping measures taken by the Commission at the height of the steel crisis, then our precious steel industry would probably have gone under. But, Mr. Speaker, I rise today not only to raise concerns about the implications of this bill for our steel industry. This is about the future of our entire manufacturing sector.
Absolutely.
Indeed, the CEOs of the British Steel, Paper, Ceramics, Minerals and Chemicals associations, along with their trade union counterparts, put it very well in their 5th of January letter to the Financial Times, when they said that, and I quote, "Without a robust approach to trade remedies, the UK government will be unable to achieve its international trade or industrial strategy ambitions. The UK's manufacturing base and tens of thousands of jobs around the country will be at risk if Parliament gets this bill wrong." So, I say to honourable members on all sides of this House, if you have any form of manufacturing in your constituency, then this bill really matters to you. As an MP who represents a constituency where the local economy relies almost entirely on manufacturing, I desperately want the government's industrial strategy to succeed. But the fact is that it won't be worth the paper it's written on if it's not underpinned by a robust trade remedies regime. It's therefore in that constructive spirit that I would urge the government to undertake a radical rethink of Schedules 4 and 5 of this bill, with reference in particular to the following 5 issues. First, this bill contains very little detail on how the post-Brexit trade remedies regime will operate in practice. Instead, it enables the Secretary of State to legislate for all important details through statutory instruments. And this really matters, not only because of it being yet another example of ministers attempting to sideline Parliament, which has become a recurring theme of this whole Brexit process, but also because there will be deep and widespread industry uncertainty until the secondary legislation is in place. Mr. Speaker, Labour MPs have raised the issue of steel in this place over 300 times since 2015. But if this bill passes in its current form, then steelworkers and their families can kiss goodbye to the idea that they will have a voice in Parliament, standing up for their interests and fighting their corner. We will not be able to do so because all the key decisions will be taken behind closed doors through statutory instruments. Second, it's imperative that the bill contains a cast-iron commitment to scrapping the lesser duty rule. This government has been the ringleader of attempts to block EU moves to reform the lesser duty rule, which means that we've only been able to impose tariffs of 13 to 16%, while the Americans, for example, can impose import duties of over 200% on dumped Chinese steel. An unreformed lesser duty rule must not be retained in EU law. We therefore call on the government to state precisely how it intends to calculate the margin of injury, to ensure that it is at least as robust as the reformed EU system, and to lay all of this detail out on the face of this bill. Third, the economic and public interest tests would create an unnecessarily high barrier to introducing any form of trade defence. None of these tests are required under WTO rules. So why is the government intent on placing multiple obstacles in the path of an industry that wishes to file a complaint? Fourth, we need changes to the proposed remit and composition of the Trade Remedies Authority, bringing it in line with global norms and ensuring proper representation of trade unions and industry. And fifth, the bill must be amended to ensure British courts are able to correct decisions made by the government that deny British industry WTO complainant rights that our competitors across the world enjoy. Without these changes, the bill will fail in its essential task of establishing a fit and proper trade defence regime. Mr. Speaker, once we've decoupled ourselves from the EU's trade defence regime, it is simply beyond debate that we will have less leverage. So, if anything, the post-Brexit regime that we create must be far tougher and more robust than the one that we have left. And that is why we simply cannot allow Schedules 4 and 5 to pass unamended. But unless amended, this bill will deny us even those scant protections. And for that reason, Mr. Speaker, I urge honourable and right honourable members to join me in the division lobbies this evening to amend and fix this broken bill.
Jack Burr.